Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 540, where tonight we are going to try to answer the question of who is Azlin Rell, which is just really an excuse to talk about Edge of Balance Precedent, but we didn't tell you that. And by we, I mean myself and Lauren, who's with me tonight. Lauren, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm so excited to talk about the Edge of Balance, I'm gonna be honest. Although Aslan, we see him a few times, the Edge of Balance was like a super notable read to me, so I'm just waiting for that part.
Yeah, it was definitely one of the highlights of phase two. And if you didn't catch the intro, I think this is now the third or fourth time. I'll try to remember to run it, but that is the Cherie Cara song by Daniel Jose Older, just set to music. I forget who put that to piano like that, but I had sampled it and used it. So I apologize. I'll give somebody credit at some point. So we've got a lot to talk about tonight. So I'm going to roll into this. Before we do, I just want to say thank you to all of everybody that's with us tonight in the live chat. We've already got a number of people already in the chat and watching this stream. And also want to say thank you to all of our Patreon members, especially our now part of the tribe members, which are Rob, Mike Borda, Lauren, Dante, Risk, Bayless, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh C, Jacob, and Reader Reborn. Reader Reborn, thank you so much for all the love on Twitter. And also our Delusions of Grandeur members, which are Rod, CJ, Alex, Steve, and Daz. That is the highest tier that we offer. If you guys are interested in Patreon, you can head out to cantinacast.com/Patreon and sign up there. We've got a ton of exclusive stuff, especially now that we're knee deep in Bad Batch. Jonesy and I are doing Patreon exclusive once again based on that, which segues into what's coming on after this. So Lauren and I will be talking about, of course, Asen Rell tonight. Right after this show, if you're a Patreon member, you've got a link now to go out to our first Patreon show of the Bad Batch Season 3 era, which is going to be all about Project Necromancer. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means and speculate on what that could mean going into the future of not only the rest of this season, but how that all affects the sequel trilogy and everything that we know to exist in the future state. So that's going to be a lot of fun to really get into talk about the dark side. And that's why I'm wearing my Rise of Skywalker t-shirt tonight. So also, programming notes. This week, we'll be breaking down episode 4 of The Bad Batch on Thursday. And then this coming Sunday, Ed and I will be back for The Way Station. And I think Jonesy and I will be back with another Patreon show that'll likely be based around the episode 4 there of The Bad Batch. Don't forget, you can head out to cantinacast.com/YouTube. Like, subscribe, throw your comments in the chat. If you got questions tonight, feel free to throw them in there. We'll definitely try to get to some of those questions and answer what we can just based on time. But like I said, we have a pretty packed show. All right, let's talk about Azlin. I think that's the fastest I've ever done it. Let's talk about
Good job. I'm
Azlin Rell.
impressed.
Thank you. I've only been doing this for a number of years now. Azlin Rell. So I think that, we've got the question of who is Azlin Rell, but I guess in your opinion, Lauren, why did we? If you remember, why did we decide we want to do a show on Aslan, or why is he important?
It feels like we've been talking about doing the show for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it feels like in phase 3, he's gonna be a pretty key player in terms of figuring out the Nameless. We've already gotten some hints about that, just kind of the way that Yoda's been working with him in particular, but I just get the sense that he's gonna be even more important because we got a sprinkle of him in phase 2, and then as time is going on and more things are coming out, it feels like he's becoming more and more prominent. So that's why I feel like it's important that we kind of get into who exactly this guy is.
Yeah. And I would agree. Like, it does sound like at some point, all roads lead back to Azlin Rell. And we'll get into why that is here as we're discussing phase 2 again. And then we'll kind of speculate at the end of the show about where we think his importance lies and kind of what we know up until this point. So that'll all end with us talking about Shadows of Starlight and then Edge of Darkness, or Eye of Darkness as well, in some ways. So definitely a very pivotal character. One of the, I guess, standout characters, and kind of has a really good so far story. Got a really good story to tell here. Now, one thing that we're doing, I've got some visuals again, so we'll do some show and tell as we're walking through this. I kind of built this show out kind of for the person who maybe has not really even been following the High Republic. I think you could probably get a sense of where we're going with all of this. We'll kind of fill you in on what happened during phase 1, during phase 3, and just kind of talk about the significance and why we've dedicated an entire show to this particular character, which again is just really an excuse to talk about Edge of Balance Precedent. But I think there'll be a good way. It'll be a good show to really, if anybody's interested or just wants to, kind of understand what's going on without having to read all the books, where hopefully we'll do you guys here justice in just 1 second. So why don't we start with a real quick brief catch up on what phase 2 and what's happening. And so again, this is the High Republic, 200 years-ish around that time before the events of the Phantom Menace. And the Jedi are being faced right now with something called the Nameless, which is basically a creature that sucks the Force out of them, turns them into a husk of dust. And they really have right now, at least current time, they have no way to battle this thing. And they're struggling. They're reeling. Not only that, they're feeling fear for the first time, which they've never felt before, not in the extent that they have, right? As part of the Jedi, they're supposed to overcome their fear, at least acknowledge it, and then move on with it, do something with it. And this is crippling, like literally physically crippling to them. So the Jedi up until this point, even in outside of canon, they really haven't been faced with something like this. And that's, a tribute to the architects of the High Republic and coming up with something that was very formidable for the Jedi, as powerful as they are. And behind all of this nonsense, and there's Azlin Rell here. This is him a little bit younger. We're going to talk about him at 150 years before we get to the current events of Phase 3. Handsome looking little guy there, right? Pretty good. But we've got the
his hairline is better there.
His hairline is better. Alex has already commented about his hairline.
I gave that to Alex. That's why I said that.
He's right there. Look, man, it all happens to us, right? At some point, we just all lose our hair. That's just the way it goes.
His is a little extreme. I will give him that.
Yeah, and then he slicks it back, which is like, dude, that's not a good look. Like, who does that, right? But so 150 years before the events of the High Republic. So I think I don't even know the math at this point. Maybe 300 years, I guess, before that. Around this time, there is this group called the Path of the Open Hand, and they're kind of like this zealot kind of group. They're basically fanatics. They believe that the Force shouldn't be tampered with, and that anytime the Force is used, that there's something horrible that happens at some point, somewhere in the galaxy as a result of that. And so naturally, they don't like the Jedi because they feel the Jedi are just manipulating the Force or taking advantage of it. It's not there for them to use, that kind of thing. And they are also, you can see the mother here. We'll talk about her in a little bit. These are the ancestors, the Rows, so the ancestors of Marchion Ro. And Marchion Ro is the main bad guy of the phase, or during the High Republic. He's the guy that's kind of orchestrating everything. He's the one that's controlling these nameless creatures that are eating at the Jedi, like literally taking their souls away, eating through them. He's kind of behind all of this. So it actually started with this group here. Path of the Open Hand, and this is a picture, just an image of them not liking the Jedi there for what they do, and they've set up shop here on Dalna. This is where we start. So we start on this planet called Dalna. Again, they seem very peaceful, but they're really not peaceful at all. And
they're peaceful until you get on their bad side.
Until you get on their bad side. Yeah. That's exactly right. And we're going to start with the Path of Deceit. So this is I think this was the first novel that was released in Phase 2 of the High Republic. And so you've got Azlin Rell is sent out to go see this woman here. This is Jedi Master Zala Markey. Her Padawan here is Kevmo Zink. And they actually went to Dalna to go investigate the Path of the Open Hand because they were suspected, the Path of the Open Hand was suspected that they had stolen a Rod of Seasons, which is basically a Jedi artifact. And so they went to go investigate. A lot of stuff happened. They disappeared, and they sent Kevmo to go find out they sent out Azlin to go find out what happened to them. This is the Rod here, the Rod of Seasons that was the artifact that was taken. So after he gets there, he realizes that he can't find them. He ends up finding their dead bodies, their carcasses, basically. And he finds out on Dalna they're living under a base. As he's going through the base, he can senses kind of dread. There's a lot of darkness all around him. He finds the two bodies, and at the time he doesn't really know what's happened, right? He didn't see the events. He just sees these Jedi that were once Jedi, literally sitting there, and carcasses, right? These husks, these gray husks, completely torn out. I'm just going to read something really quick from here, and then I kind of want your thoughts just on Path of Deceit and kind of what's led up until this point. It says Aslan had no idea what had happened here, what could have done this, what destroyed them. Whatever it was, the idea of it filled him with a nameless dread, which I thought was a very nice touch. Nameless dread.
Mhm.
Thick and awful. It pressed him from every edge of the stone chamber, but even with his eyes wide open, Aslan saw nothing, and he knew. He felt that this razor-sharp sensation came from inside himself. Suddenly, he had a name for it. Fear. Now, this is critical. This is important because a lot of what's driving Aslan to where we get to future state 150 years later is this sense of fear, to the point where it turns him to the dark side, or he actually goes to the dark side to kind of, we'll speculate on why he does that. But he's very disturbed by all of this. And it's the first kind of marker in this downward spiral because he doesn't have direct contact with the Nameless at this point. But there's something about him that I want your thoughts on this too. It feels like some Jedi are more susceptible to the effects of the Nameless than others. And for him just to be in that presence and still have the effects, and then we'll talk more about how it impacts him later on when he does come within proximity. He's very sensitive to this, and the idea of fear again is something that's constantly with him, and to the point where he becomes obsessed with it and drives him to the dark side. But I guess your thoughts on Path of Deceit, and then poor Azlin Rell and his sensitivity to it's like an allergy or something. Like he can't have peanuts. I don't know. What is it?
Yeah, I know. Well, and I was going to ask you the same question later on in reference to something else. But yeah, I mean, I've had that same thought, which is I almost wonder if is it the fact that he's been exposed multiple times, maybe because this is the first time that he's exposed. But the way I interpreted this scene is that even though he finds their bodies and the Nameless isn't actually in the room with them, I got the feeling that maybe it was nearby and maybe he could somehow sense wherever it was, because the fear that he feels, it seems more than just what happened to these people. Like it feels like that sort of overwhelming fear that the Jedi do feel in close proximity to the Nameless, where there's hallucinations and stuff like that associated with it. So
Hmm.
I almost have wondered if, because this is only his first encounter, but he does have another encounter after this, I almost wonder if it's like the more times you're exposed to it, maybe the worse off you are. We don't have a confirmation of that, but I mean, I could see it being that way. But in Path of Deceit as well, it's interesting because Aslan kind of feels like, at first he just feels like some character that the reason he's there is just to give the reader sort of the perspective of someone who has come across this. Like, oh, this is just the character that maybe he's going to relay this to the Jedi Order. But the more you read, it's clear that he's going to be so much more important than that. So I just think it's interesting that this is the type of scene where he started off.
Yeah. I think my thoughts. So my thoughts on the impact or the effect of the Nameless on Jedi. I guess one theory that I've always had is I wonder if the way you react to the Nameless is based on how powerful or how connected you are to the Force. That's really based on, like, when we think about everybody that's died from this, some of them turn to like dust immediately. Others, it's a slow kind of gradual thing. Let's not, like the mother, right? I mean, the mother was kind of in proximity of it, and I don't want to spoil anything because we're going to get to there at some point, but she ends up being a Force sensitive, even though she was part of the Path of the Open Hand. Well, that's a huge spoiler, but her hands or her arms, I think, were gray, and so that it felt like it was over time that was happening to her. But somebody like Loden Greatstorm, who was so powerful on the light side, right? Such an amazing, talented, bright Jedi master. Like, he died instantly, and there were other examples of this. And then you have other people. Who was the one that was in the chair? They got put in, that was unable to walk during the comic.
Indira Stokes.
Indira Stokes, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, she wasn't in the comic. She was in the books. But Indira Stokes, and I'm not saying any, like, maybe it's, I hate to say this, but maybe it's a midichlorian thing, right? Depending on how many midichlorians you have, depending on how connected you are with the Force. Not to say she's not a great Jedi either, or not a great Jedi, but she may not be as connected to the Force in some way. And so maybe that's why it has varying effects based on, who you are. I think on top of that, somebody like Azlin Rell, who just seems to be naturally more susceptible, right? I was kind of joking, but I almost feel it is kind of like an allergy. He just seems to be hypersensitive to this thing, to the point where it starts very with fear, and then eventually drives into madness and embracing the dark side. I think you're right, though. I think there is some kind of compounded effect that happens the more you are exposed. Right, it leaves we know for a fact, especially in the comics, they do a really good job of. There's been a number of Jedi that have come within proximity or actually had an encounter that's where we're able to kind of live, I guess. But the after effects don't ever go away. And so I think you're right. I think there is some kind of compounding effect that happens with the amount of times you've been exposed. And I think by the time we get to 150 years, when we get to phase three, to phase one, phase three, I mean, Aslan's been exposed now technically like 2 times, maybe even 3, depending on, where you think the Nameless might have been. So yeah, it has a huge effect on him that we'll, continue to talk about here. All right, so let's go on to that's kind of Path to Deceit here. Let's move into Cataclysm, which is I think this was the first adult novel of phase 2, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
It was the second one.
Second one, that's right.
Yeah.
Zoraida's was the first one. So in Cataclysm, we get to the Night of Sorrows. Now, we're going to skip over a whole lot of stuff here because it's really just focused on Azlin. But essentially, you've got a ton of Jedi that are like, okay, this is kind of ridiculous, right? We know these guys, we think these guys are stealing stuff. We think they were behind, out in this little battle called the Battle of Jeddah. And so they all come out to Dalna and decide they're going to go, quote, have peaceful negotiations, right? Marta is one of the leaders here, along with the mother. This is Mark Yambro's mother, is that right? Grandmother. Yeah, sorry, grandmother. And she, not to get into the Marta Road, but I love her character. I love the way she starts off super sweet, super innocent, and she just becomes the leader of the Nihil. I mean, she creates the Nihil, but it's a really amazing progression of how this happens. It's not an overnight kind of thing over the course of all of phase 2, but nonetheless, they end up going here, and Marta and the mother release a Nameless, and they use this rod here, which is the rod of seasons. So the rod of power. And what they've done is there's basically 3 rods. We're going to get into this more a little bit later, but there's three gems. There's 3 rods. There's a rod of seasons, the rod of day, or rod of daybreak. Is that the right one?
Yeah.
Yep. And then they've combined those 2 to make the Rod of Power, which is what you see here. And this Rod of Power is what controls the Nameless. They're able to kind of call these creatures forward, control them, send them off to kill Jedi, that kind of thing. And that's what they do. They unleash the Nameless against all of these Jedi that have now come to Dalna to kind of talk to the Path of the Open Hand. They rebrand themselves as the Path of the Closed Fist, right? So it's kind of where all this starts to really fall. And at some point during all this is going on, Azlin is part of this group, and he's part of this, entourage of Jedi that head out to Dalna. He has another encounter. I think it's through proximity. I can't remember him actually meeting it directly, but either way, what do you remember if that was the case or not?
In Path of, well, I guess Cataclysm / Path of Vengeance. Goodness, the titles just all start running together.
Yeah.
Cataclysm / Path of Vengeance. There is a moment where during the Night of Sorrows, when he's down in the tunnel, and we see this in the Edge of Balance as well, when he's down in the tunnels, something happens where I don't think we ever get a straight answer about how close he is to the Nameless, but something happens to him with a Nameless when he's down there. And that's kind of like the biggest encounter that he has. But I think the details of it were still kind of hazy even till now.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely has an impact, because I think at one point it drives to the point where he's close enough that it has an effect on him. He's kind of dizzied, and I think at one point he gets shot in the side or something. He falls down. He's kind of crippled. I think eventually someone comes by, I forget who it is now, comes by and picks him up and is like, hey, you got to keep going. And he goes through that whole process of reciting the Guardian's mantra, which is I am one with the Force is with me. That was created during Rogue One. But that's enough for him to get back on his feet and go. I pulled up an image here just for anybody, again, I know we've got a lot of new people and a lot of folks that are not caught up with phase 2 or want to know or haven't seen what this stuff is. But this is the Nameless here. So this is the creature. It's got tentacles, 4 legs. And this is a better close-up picture here, which is really cool. I had never really looked at this very closely. It's got the mother on the right eye, or the left eye technically, and her sister, which we're not going to get into, the whole another topic for another time. But yeah, this thing just eats away at Jedi and takes away their Force abilities. But yeah, he has enough. He has enough exposure to it where that happens to him. And then the mother again releases him. He starts screaming. He falls down again, and he's kind of just withered in sorrow and fear, and it's happening to a lot of. By the way, the Nameless is just running a wreck right in the tunnels down underneath in Dalna on
And
their
there's even
camp.
baby ones running around too
I
during
mean,
this.
yes, they're all over
Yeah.
the place, and they're just murdering Jedi, like turning a ton of them into just husks left and right. And so that's what gives it the name, the Night of Sorrow from the Jedi's perspective. This leads us into the Edge of Balance Precedent. So this is the second manga that was released by I think Viz Comics. Technically, this was written by the story is by Daniel Jose Older, which again he's in my opinion very similar to Captain Scott and really all of the architects and writers. Hasn't made hasn't taken a bad step as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
The
definitely.
script, yeah, the script was and the art was by Tomio Ogata. I'm not familiar with the work that he does. I just know they went out and sought some high profile people in the manga business to do this. But this it starts here. We'll get into it. Picks up right at the end of Night of Sorrow, and but before we do that, we're going to start here, which is again we're going to jump to the present time, and I say present right, during the High Republic era, Phase 3, Phase 1, right? We start with Markian Ro, and this is the bad guy, right? So we talked earlier about the Rose and the ancestors of his. This is what he looks like. He's got the mask. He's got he takes it off, and I don't have a picture of him without it, but he's like he's a psychopathic killer, right? He just wants to see the Jedi die. He just wants to see everything burn. There's not a lot that's he's not that complex.
Well, and what's interesting is that, so, I mean, comparing this to phase two, like we've just been talking about. So his grandmother was super into the path of the open hand, which is basically, the cult of don't use the force. He doesn't even have any affiliation with that cult anymore. He just, now at this stage, he just hates the Jedi. And that's pretty much enough for him, is just to hate them.
Yeah, I mean it's very simple, and we did a whole when we did. If you want more information on Markian Ro and who he is, we've done a number of episodes already. I think we did one on the Markian. What was it? The Eye of the Storm comic that released. We did that. That had some pretty good insights. And then we did a whole show that was kind of on Eye of Darkness that was really focused on Markian Ro and the Nihil and Gear Stardos and all those guys. But he's a great character. Really like what they did with him. He's definitely a formidable foe, even though he's not force sensitive that we know of. But nonetheless, Markian Ro is here, and he's also accompanied by a bounty hunter by the name of Vol Garrett, who's a Harch. And if you've never seen a Harch, they're disgusting. They look like spiders.
It's like a
with
giant spider
bipedal spiders, yeah. And this dude is huge. I mean,
with muscles.
Yeah, exactly, which makes it even creepier. Definitely skips leg day, as you can tell right here, though. I mean, come on, guy.
He's got all those arms, though.
He does.
Yeah, there's no time to work on legs.
Yeah, that's right. He's got too many arms. Just not enough hours in the day. But so Markian Ro shows up to this planet, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. And Harch is trying to find this little droid down here, which is ZZ-10. And about 150 years prior, again, going back to the Night of Sorrow, right after the events of Night of Sorrows, ZZ-10 was buried here. And when Harch wants to know why, we get a flashback. And so then we travel back in time 150 years ago. And now we're picking up here again, right at the very end of Night of Sorrow. So again, the Nameless are running around. The Jedi are fighting the path of the closed fist. And there's a lot of them. Like it's not like 20 people. They've got a massive army for these Jedi to fight.
It's like the whole commune has come out to fight, even kids. Yeah,
even kids. Yeah, exactly. Everybody. I mean, they're zealots, and they've been radicalized in a lot of ways, specifically around hating the Jedi and Force users in general. Which let's be honest, it's Force users in general. That anybody that uses the Force is who they hate. And one of the main characters of this story is Jedi Knight young Arkov, who is a Wookiee Jedi. And we'll talk about Ravna here in just a second. But let's talk about her now. So Ravna is a human. And she and Arkov are kind of in around the same time. They're together. They actually run into Azlin Rell, who when we just last talked about him, he was kind of in the fetal position, crying, screaming in fear. And he's been reciting this, they're coming for him. So he's reciting this nursery rhyme, which is, again, what we played at the very beginning at the intro. They grab him and try to get out of the tunnels. And it's about that time you can see here Arkov grabs Ravna and Azlin. And the Nihil then, or I guess technically the Nihil, they flood all of the caves underneath and kind of wash everybody out. When that happens, Azlin Rell is separated, and both Ravna and Arkov, the Jedi, are together, but Aslan's not anywhere to be found. At the same time, you can see up here where we've got Garrett. He's kind of up here at the top. He's been washed out too, and he's kind of unconscious, but he knows something's going on, right? And we'll get to this here in a little bit, but he knows that the Jedi are in fear. He knows that they got their butts kicked, but he's not exactly sure why. He hates the Jedi now. And eventually this leads to him he becomes obsessed with trying to figure out what exactly happened, because he wants to evict, justice or revenge on the Jedi for what they did. At this point, and I want your thoughts on this, because this is interesting. So Ravna she says she feels a disturbance in the Force. I've got a picture. I'm going to fast forward no, I don't have a picture of it. There is at one point kind of like a cave. You can kind of see it here in the background, all right? The blackness there. And she says she feels a disturbance in the Force. She never technically, until this point that I remember, actually saw the Nameless. I mean, she'd probably be feeling the effects of it. But Arkov is on the ground. He's definitely feeling the effects of it. She doesn't seem to be rattled as much. In fact, she almost kind of embraces this idea where she's talking about, she says, even though everything within me screams to run away, I cannot. This is something I must face. And at one point in this book, she ends up going into what I'm going to call a cave of sorts, and to face this fear. Like literally she's fearing everything else. And she almost kind of accepts that this is her fate. And she almost accepts it. I think, in my opinion, it almost like she knows that she's going to go there and she's never going to come back. And, but we don't know the fate of her. But I guess a couple questions around there are, why did she seem pretty unaffected by it? Again, maybe kind of like what we were talking about earlier. And then, I guess, do you think she lived through this? Do you think we'll ever see Ravna again?
I was gonna ask you the same thing. So I mean, it's hard to say like why exactly, because it's interesting because in this scene you can tell that she's really able to keep her wits about her in a way that we don't really see very many Jedi capable of doing throughout all of these High Republic stories. Like most of the time when the Nameless is nearby, they're doing what Arkov is doing. They're on the ground, not thinking clearly and all of that, but she's kind of able to be like, okay, this is scary, this is really bad, but I have to see it through. And she's able to make a conscious decision to go and face it. And I mean, the best theory that I could come up with is maybe it has to do with her mastery as a Jedi, because I mean, throughout this story, we do see that she is like one of the most capable Jedi at the order, or in the order at this time. But then I feel like my own theory kind of starts to fall apart when I'm comparing it to people like Loden Greatstorm, like you mentioned earlier, who also had a lot of mastery as a Jedi, but was not able to kind of stay strong in the face of the Nameless. So, I mean, I really feel like I've got nothing in terms of why she was able to make the conscious decision to go forward with it. So, I'm hoping that that's something that is explained more in phase 3, because I feel like that's something that there's got to be something to that, because maybe those Jedi that are able to do that, maybe those are the ones that need to be on the front lines of fighting the Nameless.
Yeah, maybe. And I don't have a good theory either. I think you're right. I mean, I'd like to think that she lived, but just when they find her lightsaber, right? We didn't really talk about it, but at one point she tells Arkov, she basically does a Qui-Gon Jinn on Kenobi, telling him not to lose his lightsaber because this is, it doesn't say the exact quote, but she says if you lose your lightsaber, then the battle's lost or something like that. And Arkov actually comes across her lightsaber and it's just laying there, and she's not, of course, with it. And so he just assumes that she's died, and eventually he ends up going back to the Jedi Council and he tells everyone that Ravna has died. And so I think it's probably safe to assume that she did.
I mean, he never found the husk though.
True.
So
Yeah. I don't know.
it seems
It's
like he
interesting.
would have.
Right. Unless he never actually went into this dark space, this dark tunnel. And I don't know. I don't know, it spit out her lightsaber. I don't know. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I do like the ambiguity of not knowing though, because I think it sets it up for maybe some later storytelling if they really want to go take it there.
Well, and I just love her character. Like, I love it how she was able to just make make the hard choice, but make the choice anyway. Like, I just thought
Hmm.
that was super cool. So I would love to get more of an explanation as to what exactly was going through her head in terms of knowing she has to face it. Like, I just feel like there's more to that. So I hope that we find out at some point.
Yeah, same here. So back to Azlin Rell, I mentioned earlier he was kind of separated, and so he wakes up, somewhere around them, anywhere, anyways, and he wakes up and there's dead bodies basically everywhere. Right, there's all these Dalna people that have died, they've been drowned, and at this point he is starting to feel the effects in a greater way now, because again, this is now the second time he's been in proximity of the Nameless. And you can see here where he's saying it's here with me. He's starting to feel fear. It looks, the image we've got right now, he's got blood pouring out of his eyes, and really it's a hallucination. And he starts having these hallucinations from here on out, and he can't escape them. I mean, they drive him absolutely mad, to the point where it's crippling, and he gets instituted here, which we'll see. And you can see some more examples here, where he's got these bodies that are kind of swarming. They're grabbing him, pulling him down. You can see where it says, "We're waiting for you." This is the nursery rhyme that keeps playing in his head. It's going over, the lyrics keep repeating themselves over and over, and this doesn't ever go away. You can see right there the Kara, which is another name, I think, for the Nameless, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
Um,
I do have a question for you.
yeah.
Why do you think that because so when him and when they're going through the tunnels, and this is before we lose Ravna and before he encounters the Nameless, it kind of seems like he's able to sense the Nameless before Master Ravna and Arkoff are able to. Do you have any theories on why that is? Do you think it's because he just encountered the Nameless before, so he kind of knew what the feeling was? Or do you think it goes back to, are some people more sensitive to the Nameless than others?
Oh yeah. I don't know. I think I think it's probably the sensitivity more than anything else. But yeah, you're right. I mean, he just came off an encounter with it. But there is some kind of connection here. Whether it's not purposeful, but there is he's got some kind of weird connection with them, and to the point of obsession again later down the road. But I do think it's because it's a combination of him having already encountered them, and then also just being hypersensitive to the effects, the power that the Nameless have over the Force. You know, but yeah, it's at this point here. He is then taken to I think it's a hospital at this point, and he's gone crazy. You can see right here, he's writing in his journal. He's constantly taking notes, writing the lyrics to the nursery rhyme over and over again. It's really consumed him at this point. And let me go back. Let me go one wrong way here.
Do you think there's anything actually important in that journal, or do you think it's just delusions? Or do you think it starts off as delusions and then gets important later on?
I don't know, because I would like to think the journal is important because they go after it later in this book.
Yeah.
And so I think there's probably more there. And what we didn't really cover is that Azlin Rell is kind of a researcher. When I think it was before on one of the missions, he was doing a lot of research before, for a particular mission. And then when he was told that he was going to be dispatched to Dalna to go figure out what happened to Kevmo and Zala, he actually did a lot of research on the path of the open hand, on Dalna, right? He did a lot of research around it before he went there. And so he's kind of established as this bookworm, researcher kind of character. I would like to think that at some point he does do some research on this, because I think this is what leads to, well, in some ways I think it does. They just don't, it's not very clear on when he did do the research. I'm assuming he did it now, because I think once he got to the sanatorium, I don't think they really gave him a whole lot of time to get out and just, stretch his legs. I think he was pretty much strapped in a padded room for the most part.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and all of this leads into, the stones, which again, we'll talk about here in just a bit. But when he's in the hospital here, he's visited by Garrett. And Garrett comes in and wants to know, again, all the secrets. What do you know about what happened to the Jedi? He can see him here. He rips out a couple pages from the book because Azlin can't stop writing. He's just scribbling feverishly around stuff. And then he's actually stopped. Garrett stopped because these attendants come in and they come to check on Azlin Rell. They basically, tie him down, say, hey, everything's be fine. Let's move him to it. They say we're going to move him to a monastery. And Garrett overhears that and feels like, okay, that's probably an easier way to get after this kid is not do it here when all these other people around. I'll wait till he gets moved to this monastery and on Grava, which is a planet here. And yeah, he comes back a little bit later. Just for the sake of closing the loop on this one, this is Arcov and ZZ-10. They've gone back to the Jedi. This is where I was like, man, the freaking Jedi Council again. They go back to the Jedi Council.
What else is new?
I know. What else is new? And they Arcov tells them, like, Rava, what happened to Ravna and how she's gone. And they pretty much are like, okay, yeah, it sounds like she died. Oh, man, rest in peace kind of thing. They don't really make a whole lot of big deal about it. And then after that,
I love it how ZZ never gives up on Ravna.
Yeah.
Like, he's so dedicated. I know that this show is not about ZZ, but man, ZZ is the cutest droid. I just had to say.
He's your
he's
typical
so sweet.
ride or die droid, if there ever was one. But if you can see here, I've got this panel pulled up where they're kind of talking about, okay, the creatures. So the Jedi's aware that something happened on Dalna during the Night of Sorrow, but no one actually had a firsthand account of seeing the Nameless. And so they're having this really quick conversation with, by the way, it's not even like a council kind of thing. It's just these two people deciding that they're going to make this. I think one of them is named Din. I forget the other character, but it says, and what are the rumors of the monstrous creatures terrorizing Dalna? Just rumors. There is no need to cause unnecessary panic among the Order. The other guy agrees and says, precisely my thought, Mr. Rin. That's it, not Din, Rin. And then says, now is the time to tend to the wounded, to rebuild. May the Force be with us. So they just kind of like, I don't know, these rumors about Force people getting turned into husks or seeing horrible things, or everyone suddenly feeling, fear amongst the Jedi. We'll just kind of wash it away. Let's just, turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to what's going on.
When we see Yoda do the same thing at the end of Path of Vengeance, like these two Jedi were not the only ones that made this mistake of being like, let's just brush this under the rug. It's kind of like they all thought the same thing until it came back to bite them.
Yeah, 150 years later. That's right.
Yeah.
So then at this point, this is where Arcov and ZZ go visit Azlin Rell at the monastery. He's recovering here. And you can see the image here. This is what Azlin sees when he sees Arcov, right? This just kind of crazy, monstrous, delusional looking thing here. The bleeding's happening. They'll do what they can. You can see that in the right-hand side there. That's, again, a line from the nursery rhyme that he keeps repeating. So he's not any better, honestly. And he says that something on Dalna took a hold of me. I can't tell what's real anymore. I'm scared. And you can see, again, he's just having all these crazy hallucinations. They're like, all right, maybe it's a little too early. Why don't we give you time? We'll be back a little bit later. Clearly, you're still dealing with some things. And when they do return, and I don't know how much time passes here, a couple days, couple weeks, whatever it may be, they come back to the monastery and they walk in, and you can see here a lot of the people, the attendants, maybe the people themselves at the monastery, they're all kind of down and out. Some are dead, some are barely alive. And Arcov is completely, rattled by this. They eventually find Azlin, and you can see him here. He's being held up by Garrett. So Garrett had come back, obviously, to kind of collect on what he said he was going to. He wanted some more information about what had happened and try to get to the bottom again, because he feels like, hey, if I can control whatever it was that power was during the Night of Sorrow, I can get revenge on the Jedi. Like, that is like, nobody can stop me, since they were clearly out of their element and couldn't do anything about it. They get into a fight here, Arcov and Garrett, which is really cool. They're both really huge and bulky. And then Azlin kind of has this, I don't know, it's not really a dark side moment. Although we forgot to mention, at one point during the Night of Sorrow, Azlin actually, because he was obsessed with the Nameless and not truly understanding what was going on, he actually goes into the mind of one of the characters. And again, we're not getting into all the details here, but he goes into the mind of one of the characters, basically touches the dark side. And the way I interpreted this was kind of that first step for him that took him down the dark side path. And he went into the mind of one of the Path of the Open Hand, Closed Fist people, and pulled out some information where he pulled out the name of Marda, right? Marda Rowe. And he also determined that there was something about the Rod of Seasons. And that's what kind of got him on this whole path and the obsession of trying to understand what Marda Rowe, the connection between Marda Rowe, the Path of Seasons, and the Nameless. But here, going back to this quick moment, he's on the ground here while Arkov and Garrett are fighting, and he has this kind of like Tetsuo moment from Akira, where suddenly he just releases the force, and there's this big explosion, and it knocks everybody down. It brings down the room or the building that they're in. But definitely, I kind of saw this as him channeling the dark side, or a manifestation or an explosion of sorts that came from just how dark he's become and how obsessed he's become,
To me, it does
more than
seem
anything
like
else.
dark side because it's an emotional moment that leads up to the explosion. So to me, that means dark side.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's definitely there, and we'll see more about this in full color, literally in full color, a little bit later once he's fully embraced the dark side. Just quickly on the comments, one up versus CPU says, I want to know how he gets over these hallucinations. I don't think he does. I don't honestly don't think he does. I think, well, I shouldn't say that. There are moments in this comic, at least, where I think he does come to. He has these like moments of lucidness, and then he kind of goes right back. And it's actually in one of these moments that there's a conversation that's actually able to be had. I think it's actually right after this, if I'm not mistaken, because Arkov takes him back to his room, and you can see here where Azlin tells him, "Here, take this. You'll know when it comes for you." Talking about the Nameless, and he gives him this journal of all the notes and all the research, I'm assuming, that he's been taken, and he hands this off to Arkov because he realizes that there are people that want this. And I think what he's thinking here is that anybody that would get this could eventually be able to control the Nameless, and so he doesn't want that to get into the hands of the wrong people. But I think it was like in this kind of moment, very brief at that, it does feel like that's when he does get over those hallucinations. Do you think he ever gets over them, or do you think he just kind of lives with them all the time and is, sustains more than anything else?
I don't think they ever stop completely, but I do think he gets to be a little bit more in control of them over time, probably through moments like this, like you mentioned. And then also in Shadows of Starlight, which we'll get to in a minute, there is a line that sounds like Yoda also helped him with the hallucinations as well.
Mm,
But I mean, he would have had to have gotten a little bit better before then. Otherwise, I don't think he would have covered all the ground that he covered by the time that we see him in Shadows of Starlight. But you do get the sense that he's with time it's gotten better, but I don't think it has ever completely gone away, and I don't
yeah.
think it ever will.
Yeah. One of them says, he seems mostly okay in the future. Yeah.
He
I
has his
mean,
moments.
he has his moments. He's
His
gotten
okay
better.
moments. Yeah.
It's only taken 150 years, but so Arkov takes ZZ-10. He buries him in the ground, and the order of events here is different than the book, but I just figure for the sake of the narrative, it makes more sense. But Arkov actually buries him and equips him with all these blasters, these cannons as well. So Arkov, or say ZZ-10, is buried completely. And when we now jump to kind of present day as far as the storytelling goes, back to the day of Zamarkian Row, and once Garrett has uncovered him, ZZ-10 opens fire with all the cannons here. So it's kind of a defense mechanism that he had set up here. So, um, and then right around this time is when we get the return of the Jedi. Arkov comes back. He's now a Jedi Master. He's no longer a young Jedi. And these guys have at it again once time. And it's kind of a very one-sided battle. Like, Arkov really just beats the snot out of Garrett the entire time. You can see here, Garrett sitting there. He's got, bruises all over his face. And it's pretty
And
much the end of.
ZZ is okay, thank God.
He's okay, yeah. I think they unplug him. Yeah, you can see him here. They unplug him they unbury him. They unplug
Yeah.
him from all the cannons. And this is the character here that we're seeing now is a friend of Maz Kanata. I won't hold that against her, but this is Master Jedi Sav. She showed
I was
another.
wondering what you were gonna say.
I know. I'm trying to be nice. Plus, we're out of time. But another character, I actually like her. She's awesome. She's a character that's been almost exclusive to the High Republic comics, but another character creation of Daniel Jose Older. So she's really great. But the three of them basically say it's time to go. We got work to do, and they leave. And that's kind of the end of Precedent. But I guess maybe quickly your thoughts on the books. I know you really wanted to talk about it, but this is, for me, it was one of the highlights for phase two. But what about you?
Yeah, definitely. Same for me. I mean, what I really loved about it is it was a highlight of phase two, but it also felt like it could be a story on its own too. If you wanted to just read this story, I mean, I just felt like the characters really stood on their own really well. You don't really need a whole bunch of context to find these characters lovable and to understand what's great about them. And so that just made this read just so great for me, specifically because of that reason. And also just the fact that Arkoff and Zizi, like their relationship as they're going through all of this together and working with Aslan, and they're just really trying to do the right thing, and they have a really nice bond too. So all of that, I mean, overall, Edge of Balance was a great story. In addition to the key information that it gives us about Aslan.
Yeah. And at this point, Aslan disappears. Like there's a big time gap here. We have no idea what happens for the next 150 years. He actually leaves. I didn't show this the image, but I think in this book as well. Again, not expressly or explicitly shown, but it looks like he just disappears. Like he hands the journal over. He does a couple other things, and then he just leaves.
Yeah,
And
he's just gone the next time they try to go talk to him again.
yep, yep. And so we get a big time jump. Now he doesn't show up again. Again, 150 years later, he shows up in this book, another book by Daniel Jose Older, which is Midnight Horizon, one of the stellar books out of Phase One, one of the big standout books. Honestly, I know this was Jonesy's favorite, incredibly good book. But he shows up very briefly at the very end. Yoda has his big heroic moment that I think a lot of people have always wanted to see Yoda kind of in his prime more than we saw in the prequel trilogy. This is it. Like he has a pretty amazing moment here, which we're not
His
going to talk about.
Gandalf moment.
His
We'll just
Gandalf
call it
moment.
that. Yeah. Leave it
Yep.
at that.
And he's there with Azlin Rell. Although at the time, again during Phase One, we were all going like, "Who the hell is this guy?" Like, and he doesn't do anything. He's just there. We're told he's wearing a hood, but I just want it for note's sake. This is the next time that we see him. In the comic book, there was a part there where Yoda had snuck up onto the spider ship. I forget what the name of the ship is called, from the Nihil. And he finds one of the rods, and that's when he's like, "Oh my God, now I get it." And then he disappears, and we don't see Yoda again until he shows up here at midnight. So not only did we get Azlin Rell show up, but we got Yoda showing up. He has his Gandalf moment, and then we jump into Shadows of Starlight. And so we've kind of covered this as when we covered Shadows of Starlight 1 through 4. But basically, Yoda shows up to the Jedi Council with Azlin Rell. There's a moment there, I think, where who was it that recognized him?
Reith Silas.
Reith Silas.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Reith Silas had seen him, I think, during Midnight Horizon, if I'm not
He
mistaken.
was there when he showed up. Yeah. So when they
Yeah.
walk in, Reith is like, "Oh, I think I recognize that guy."
Yeah, same kind of robe and all that. And of course, he doesn't show who he is. And then Yoda basically tells the Jedi Council, "Look, I found this guy. He takes his hood off and says, 'I embrace the dark side. I did it for us.'" So at this point, again, now we're fast forward. He's fully embraced the dark side. He's not a Sith. I want to be very clear about that, but he's definitely in touch with the dark side. He's really given in to his fear, because that, again, to go back to what I said at the very beginning, this fear has driven him so far. And I think, at least the way I rationalize this or kind of theorize this, and I want your thoughts, I just felt like at some point he realized, I can't keep fighting this. Like it's an unwinnable fight. And the only way to really kind of, only way to kind of function is to embrace the fear. And by embracing that fear, that naturally led him down a course of becoming a dark side user in some ways. But I guess it's same kind of theory for you, I guess.
Well, he definitely views the dark side as a necessity for him. He didn't do it voluntarily. The way he talks about it, it's like, this was the only choice, so this is what I had to do. And he seems pretty confident in that. So that to me kind of goes in line with what you were saying about giving into the fear, not trying to fight an unwinnable fight. Um, I'm sure that there were probably a few. I mean, I'm guessing that there were probably a few sort of events that made him actually go all that way and be full dark side. But it definitely seems like eventually he somehow came to the conclusion that this is necessary. It's really the only way for me to survive is to live this way.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, yeah, they say as much, but in reading in between the lines, I think that's probably the natural course. When he does this, when he reveals himself, he does it in front of the Jedi Council, and I don't have the image up right now, but you can see Yoda putting his hand up. But the Jedi Council is like ready to take him out because they can sense how evil, maybe how evil he is, or how steeped in the dark side he is. I mean, he's in the freaking council on Coruscant at the Jedi Temple, and of course Yoda's pleading with them, saying no, he's not what you think. I've been working with him.
And
You can
even
see,
if he's not fully evil, he's definitely a loose cannon and you don't know what he's going to do. So
yeah, that's
that
a
at
good
least
point.
freaks them out.
It
Yeah.
does. Yeah, you're right. He's very unpredictable, especially given, I mean, if anybody knows who he was, I mean, all right, he was not really all there mentally before he left, right? So how can you really trust him? During the Shadows of Starlight, there was a couple moments here where we actually got to see and witness what Yoda was doing, right? Meditating with him, trying to help him kind of, come to terms with his fear, coming back to the light in some ways. And you
Helping with
start
the
to,
hallucinations too, probably.
yeah, probably with the hallucinations. And it was like right around this time, I'm thinking, all right, this is cool, man. This is a guy that went to the dark side. Yoda's working with them. He's going to be the savior. And then he pulls an idiot move here a little bit later. But even when they were training, there was a moment here where he almost tried to kill Yoda. And Yoda, of course, put a stop to that pretty quick. Never really got any further.
And
Um,
then Yoda's like, let's take a break.
yeah, he's like, yeah, I think we're done
It's
here.
like, I think that's enough
Let's take
for
5.
now.
Smoke him if you got him, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then they're at some point they end up going to a mission, right? They're going to go head out to a planet. What was the name of that planet? I forget. Tavrix Prime,
Yes.
something like that.
Yes.
And you can see right here, Yoda's walking away, and then he does this. God, Asen Rell does a bonehead thing. He comes and talks to this pilot here and suggests something. He's using the Force, the dark side. Force is a power of suggestion to tell him something. We don't know what that is until they get to the planet that they're supposed to get to, and Yoda and Azlin get off on a shuttle because they're going to go. The bigger ships up. It's a bigger ship, I should say, that they kind of travel there with. They leave on a shuttle, head down to the planet's surface, and this person that he talked to ends up sabotaging the entire ship, like sends it crashing down. The whole thing blows up, and Yoda's like just freaking out, like, what in the hell's going on here? And this is Azlin Rell here saying this act was a gift to everyone who touches the Force, Jedi, Sith, all of us. I will save all of us. I can see what you cannot. And this is where it ends. Like, this is as far as, bringing it up to date on where we are. I mean, there's something in Eye of Darkness that I think you and I talked about. It was a similar scene where he ends up going to the council, and I'm not sure if they ended up kind of repeating themselves, or maybe that, I don't really understand how that or why that
It was
happened, but
such a similar scene to the one in this comic that it was kind of unclear. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, but I guess why don't you quickly just kind of talk about the reason why they were heading to this Travix Prime planet, because that ties back into some stuff, other books that happened during Phase 2.
Yes. So Travis Prime. So the reason that they were going there is because in Shadows of Starlight, there's a flashback where Azlin Rell is talking to someone in a bar back several years ago when he's younger, and it's mentioned the Leftbrooks. And so the Leftbrook family had access to a compass type of device that would lead you to the planet of the Nameless. And so this is all explained in the Quest for Planet X, which was one of the middle grade novels from Phase 2. And so basically it sounds like what Aslan and Yoda are trying to do is figure out the planet that the Nameless came from, and then maybe kind of like retrace their steps just as kind of like a starting place of what can we actually do with this information. And so through his research over the years, Aslan learns that this is probably where the Leftbrooks are, or at least people who knew them or people who have the compass. It's unclear exactly who is supposedly on Traffic's Prime, but they basically have a lead that has brought them to this planet. And so what Aslan does is he's like, okay, whether it's people down there, the compass is down there, someone who knows where the compass is, whatever it is, I've got to destroy it because it's more important that there is no way that anybody could ever get to this planet again and make the Nameless problem even worse, bring more Nameless back or whatever it may be. And so that's why he sabotages the ship to just destroy this whole place. So that way he's cutting off any possibility of anybody else getting that information. And so even though he's done this horrible thing, in his mind, he's like, well, actually, what I've done has prevented a bigger problem, even though obviously that's like his delusions talking probably.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the way that he sees it.
yep. So I guess at this point, like, how do you feel like how much of what Aslan Rell knows is going to play into stopping the Nameless? Because even again, right at the end of Edge of the Eye of Darkness, I should say, the Jedi really don't have a lot going on for themselves, right? This thing is still out there. Markion Rowe still knows he has the upper hand against the Jedi. The Jedi are, I mean, they're literally living in fear. Now they feel better because, you know, Avar Chris is back, and they were able to kind of break through the storm wall, but they really haven't had a really good victory just yet, and they haven't figured out the Nameless just yet. But where do you think this is going? Any theories around that? And I'll share mine as well.
I mean, I do almost wonder if when Azlin Rell says, "I will save us all," I almost wonder if he's right because he makes a really good point, which is that he is willing to do things that the Jedi are not willing to do. And I think it unfortunately, I think it might take something like that for them to actually get a leg up against the Nihil or the Nameless or both. So, and it sounds like if from Yoda's perspective, I mean, if you want to fight the Nihil first, you've got to figure out the Nameless because you can't fight the Nihil if you don't have the Nameless figured out. So, I feel like Aslan is going to be really key in them actually making any progress. And I almost wonder if the progress that he's gonna help them make, if it is gonna be something that is kind of like against the Jedi way, but the Jedi are gonna be in a position to where they're forced to accept it.
Hmm. I like that, because it certainly would put everybody out of their comfort zone and put us more into that position that we see them in during phase or the sequels, where they're really hypersensitive to attachments, and they've adopted so many of the Guardian protocols as just permanent, right? It's not even a temporary thing. We're kind of steeping into some stuff that we've not talked about on this show, but if you're following High Republic, you know exactly what we're talking about. I think I don't know if Asen Rell himself will be the one that saves the Jedi, but I think he is key to information. Of course, I think at some point during his not to get into all this, but there's a character, I think it's Vin Barnabas, right? Which is an amazing character. I think this is a character that was created by Claudia Gray, and he was a Jedi that was even before the High Republic, or he was part of the High Republic era, but many years before all of the stuff during even Phase 2. And he actually came across, and we're not getting into it, there was a stone, this purple stone that was then broken up into three stones. Two of the stones became the Rod of Seasons and the Rod of Daybreak.
Daybreak.
And when those two rods were combined, it created the Rod of Power, which allowed Marta and the Mother to control the Nameless. My theory is that at some point he may have come across information to whatever this third rod is, and he knows where that is. I'm going to call it the Rod of Dawn or Rod of Dusk, because I think if you have the Rod of Daybreak and the Rod of Seasons and you put those together, that's something to wake up the Nameless. So you need something to put the Nameless to sleep. And so I was thinking dusk, dawn, whatever it is. But at some point, I think there is another rod out there, and I think that's where they ultimately are going to go. Maybe they get this third rod. They combine that Rod of Dusk or whatever with the Rod of Seasons, and now they have the power to put them to sleep. I think you're right. I think you've talked many times about, at some point, maybe the stones need to go back to Planet X. Maybe
The
the
Nameless
Nameless,
themselves.
Nameless themselves
Put
have
them
to be
all on a
returned.
ship.
Yep, something, right? I think that could also be part of it as well, because you have to restore the balance to that planet. Again, we're getting into some stuff that we haven't talked about, but yeah, I mean, putting that stuff back together, or putting it all the way it came from,
Put
or the
that
way it
thing
was
back where
originally,
it came from.
yeah, is probably it. So maybe there's something there, but I think that's really what they're going for, is this third rod, or maybe another rod of sorts, right? If it's not specifically that one, because there were many gems that were scattered. It wasn't just three that we know of, but at some point, yeah, I think he is going to be key to this. And it doesn't take away from this idea of having Jedi or non-Jedi folk fight the Nameless, because I still like that idea. I still like the Republic coming to the aid of the Jedi. But I think once the Nameless are gone, I mean, it's pretty much game over. I can't see at that point, especially now that the lightsaber nullifier thing is gone. I mean, the Nihil don't have anything else really to defend themselves. Markian Rowe has nothing to defend himself with at that point.
They're just like very aggressive pirates without the Nameless.
Yeah,
So,
they really
what do
are.
you think about Aslan's journal? Do you think that has anything in there? Like if they like if maybe if the journal's uncovered in phase 3 somehow, or do you think it will be uncovered, or do you think it matters?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. They put so much emphasis on Edge of Balance, and Garrett was very focused on trying to get it. They never really explained what's in the journal, but now we have the source of the journal right here with Aslan. in present time. So I think, yeah, I think there's probably something in there. And again, it could just be clues or more information about how all of this really works, right? Maybe stuff that he found from Vin Barnabas, because that he was kind of the forefront, and he was probably the first person that came across all of this and understood what the Nameless were and all that. So it sounds like this wasn't the first time or even the second time that this has all kind of happened before. So, but yeah, I would imagine we're going to find the journal at some point. So, was this the Zelda games? Yeah, I know. The Rod of Seasons, I think at least, was in the Zelda games. I think it was used in one of the Mario games too, if I'm not mistaken, which was just a play on the Zelda game. Hey, all right, well, we got to go because we got another show here that we're going to go to. I'm going to run over to do the Patreon show with Jonesy. But before we get out of here, did you want to give some shout outs to some folks?
Yes, thank you to everyone who joined us in the live chat. So tonight we had Noah, Music Train, Sky, Alex, and One Up First CPU.
Yep. Yeah, thanks everybody for swinging out, and hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully this piques your interest. If you're not a fan of or have not been following the High Republic, and this has piqued your interest, start with Phase 1. It's definitely worth the ride. A lot of characters to take in, but take a pen and paper or whatever you use and take some notes, and I promise you it'll be okay. It's worth the ride, especially now going into Phase 3. So, cool. All right. Let me roll the credits, and don't forget to, if you're with one of our Patreon members, Jonesy and I will be covering Project Necromancer, which has been mentioned once again in the most recent episode of the Bad Batch. We're going to get into all the details as much as we can, speculate and theorize on that. So, Lauren, thanks so much for being here. Thank you all for being here tonight, and we'll see you guys here very soon.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.